Good afternoon, everyone. Charles Hardy here. Nice to see you all. Hope you had a good day at this event. Lots of good sessions. So we're here to bring this home. Charles Hardy from Handshake. I lead on university partnerships, and I'm very pleased to have two high-powered guests from the US joining us for our little fireside chat this afternoon. Well, I say this afternoon, but actually, for them, it's very early in the morning, rather early for me, in San Francisco. So big kudos for joining us so early. Let's start with a couple of introductions. Christine, please, could you introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit of your story?
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Cruzvergara. I am the Chief Education Strategy Officer here at Handshake. I've been at Handshake for a little over 3 years. And for those of you that don't know me, I actually spent the first decade of my career working in higher education in roles very similar to yours. I had the pleasure of leading the career office at George Mason, as well as at Wellesley College outside of Boston. And during my time in those positions, I was tasked with re-envisioning and reimagining what career education should look like for those institutions. How could we more deeply embed career education and career preparation into the fabric and the culture of those institutions? And I discovered through that experience that I loved leading change. It's not easy, as many of you know, to lead change at any institution. There are so many different stakeholders with very a wide array of agendas, and the challenge of getting everybody excited about one vision and moving together collectively in one direction is both daunting, but also incredibly rewarding. And so it was through that experience that I discovered the ability to lead change, and to do so at scale was what ultimately excited me about the Handshake opportunity, and to come here and to be able to work with thousands and thousands of institutions to have greater impact for all of our students. So that's a little bit about me, and excited to be here with all of you.
Thanks, Christine. We're excited to have you too. And you talking about change reminds me of my old management consultancy training at IBM, where change was not just about technology and process, but a huge part around people and how it all fits together. And if you don't do all three, you're not going to be successful. Good morning to you, Valerie, as well. Love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your own journey.
Good day, everyone. I am very excited to be here this morning. Yes, a little bit later than Christine, because I'm more in the central time zone, US. So I am currently, and very happily, the newly installed Chief Legal Officer for Handshake. I think I am about to start my 3rd month here, and I could not be more excited. Best move I've ever made in a series of great career moves that I have been very blessed to be able to make. So my career, I have had sort of 3 acts. My first act was in marketing and communications as a graduating from Syracuse University, and I spent about 10 years for a variety of very high-profile nonprofits doing marketing communication for those organizations, from companies like Jazz at Lincoln Center to Environmental Defense Fund, so always with an altruistic bent. And then the middle act of my career, I was a vice president for a variety of consumer-based companies, including Wyndham Hotels and Resorts, Realogy, which owns Century 21, Sotheby's, Coldwell Banker, et cetera. And then also I worked for KPMG as well. And then my previous role prior to joining Handshake, I was at Tesla for 4 years. 2 of those years, I was the Associate General Counsel on the legal team. And the last 2 years, I had the pleasure of leading the people team as Vice President of People for Tesla. As the VP of People for Tesla, I had a front row seat into the challenges that a large organization faces in scaling with the war for talent in every possible field, and understanding that in order to remain competitive, all of my peers understood that we had to have a breadth of a pipeline wider than the traditional schools that we traditionally recruited from. You know, every field, whether it's engineering, law, accounting, has 10 or 12 schools that they typically go to. That model doesn't work anymore. And also at the same time, understanding that we need to diversify the pipeline to ensure that we have underrepresented populations in every level of the company, and the challenge of how to do that at speed, at scale. And so when I discovered Handshake, interestingly enough, my son was an intern at Tesla, and he was doing extremely well. And as any good legal recruiter would do, I said, are you thinking about applying for the company when you graduate? He says, well, Apple hit me up, so I might talk to them. And I thought, okay, now this is no offense to my son, and he's allowed me to tell this story. He's at the University of Arizona graduating. Phenomenal school, but not number 1 or through 10 on the radar of engineering schools. And I was like, how did Apple find you? And he said, Handshake. I said, what's Handshake? And then I set about to find out what this tool was that was enabling large organizations to find great talent in unusual places. And very great, long story short, I knew that the next place I wanted to be was a place where the mission can be more personal, where we can help millions of students have the same types of opportunities that unlike my son, who don't have connections, who don't have the ability to know someone to get an opportunity. How do we democratize opportunity across the globe? That's what I wanted to spend this part of my career on. So I could not be more thrilled to be at Handshake now.
Thank you. I mean, that's a lovely story about your son. It's always great to hear those kind of stories, and actually those connections happening. I think it's also fascinating how you talked about 3 acts of your own career. And I did have a quick glance at both your LinkedIn profiles. I mean, Valerie, you actually majored, I think, in communications in TV, radio, and film.
That's right.
Christine, I'm looking at psychology and family studies. I myself did psychology at university, so a little bit similar there. But then you reflect on how we've all ended up at the same organization, X number of years later, different for all of us, of course. Is really interesting to me, and how that doesn't necessarily define what your career path will be. And if I think of myself as a student a number of years ago, there was barely an internet. We didn't have mobile phones. There was no social media. If I think forward to the companies I've worked at, LinkedIn didn't exist, Handshake didn't exist. And I went on a journey that happened to be in certain places at certain times. I said to IBM, we should put our jobs on the internet. And they said, go on then, do that. And that changed my career just in that moment. And I said later on in my career, we should be doing more on LinkedIn, go and do that. And now I'm in a phase where I said, well, we should be doing Handshake. So it's interesting how you can't necessarily predict and really make long-term career plans. Maybe if you're not going to be a doctor, maybe. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on young people who feel that the decisions they're making, and I also reflect on my own daughter at the moment, who's 16 going on 17, choosing what to do next. They feel this pressure of the decision is for life, when really our careers take these random zigzag journeys to places we don't know, and particularly with career options that aren't even around when we're making these decisions. Just to change tack slightly, I might be slightly biased, but for me, I'd say LinkedIn kind of redefined some of recruitment in how previous to that, searching for talent and people was really the exclusive executive level headhunting, and LinkedIn enabled a much wider search for talent proactively. And Handshake sort of taken that and really defined it specifically for the first time in the student and graduate market. Valerie, from your own perspective, and you touched on your time at Tesla, and I'll resist going off on a tangent around your former boss, but how are progressive organizations like Tesla really thinking about this now? You touched on it just there, but have we moved on from the spray and pray job ads that sort of have defined student recruitment till now?
So I want to be mindful of my NDA, so I'm going to speak in generalizations if you don't mind. And I will say that in the space of where, the CHROs, the VPs of talent, are trying to figure out, we have a lot of choppy waters, right? We have the great resignation, right? So that then we have, the individuals who are just not coming into the workforce. So the pool of candidates is much smaller. You add to that LinkedIn, and I'm going to kind of steal this from our CEO, Garrett, it's a phenomenal place if you've got connections. So it still works when you know people and you have connections and you just want to leverage those. But where does an organization go for early talent who doesn't have connections, quite frankly, has no reason to be on LinkedIn? And I have, 3 college-age sons, so I know personally they're not interested in being on LinkedIn. There's no purpose for it. Where do they go, and where do employers find those folks who are early career and early talent? Having discovered Handshake, it was the perfect discovery at the perfect time when those challenges of diversifying the pipeline, thousands of roles to fill, the need to fill them fast and with qualified individuals. Handshake is it. I mean, it sounds overly simplistic to say, but Handshake is where employers are going who understand that they can't keep going to the same places, competing for the same talent against each other. We all have to widen the pool, and Handshake serve the purpose.
Thanks for that, Valerie. And in terms of engaging on Handshake or any platform, are there specific activities or behaviors that you would attribute to being successful in engaging with students?
So here's where, and this is where, so the understanding of, depending on what level you are in the organization, how you view and utilize Handshake. So for people like me at the top of the HR and VP pool, what we wanted and what we all want is for our DI teams, our talent teams, our HR teams to go and find the talent on Handshake. And to go and directly engage, to be able to see the profiles of the students, what they're interested in, what they're looking to do, and be able to directly contact them and have a meaningful connection immediately, most often before they even leave school, which quite frankly, and we could do a whole hour on this, that's the time you want to get the talent when they are new to the workforce, when they're looking to join that first company. They haven't learned the things that companies want them to unlearn. It is the perfect time to find them, is while they're in school, and you can directly engage, have conversations, have meetings, have a coffee chat, and to find out what they're interested in a way that you just can't scale, trying to do it in person, flying teams across the country, paying the expenses for hotels and desks and signage, when you go right on Handshake and you can directly talk to the people who want to talk to you. It's priceless.
Yeah, it's really interesting thing. And obviously, a lot of that challenge now post-pandemic is how we balance a hybrid world and where we can make human connections, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. Christine, just reflecting back on, talked about your time in university and higher ed in career service before joining Handshake and moving into technology solutions land. Are there things that you've learned in that time since you've been at Handshake that you wish you'd known before, or you would pass on to your earlier self?
Wow, Charles, there's a lot that I've learned in my time at Handshake. I think when I reflect back on my journey, there are probably 3 areas that stand out to me the most in terms of what I wish I had perhaps known when I was working in the university setting. One of the things is that working at a company like Handshake, we have to take a broader perspective all the time. As a company, we can be made obsolete very quickly if we are not paying attention to the larger ecosystem that we operate within. We have to know what's happening in the ecosystem. We have to know what the trends are that are in the ecosystem. We have to know how recruiters are thinking or changing the way that they work, as Valerie was just talking about. We have to know the trends on how this generation of students wants to interact and engage and think about their technology. We have to know what our competitors are doing. There are a lot of different facets to what is happening in the ecosystem that we have to constantly keep a pulse of, because if we are not thinking ahead of that, we could be irrelevant very, very quickly. And so having that broader perspective constantly and constantly scanning is just a part of our daily lives that I think all three of us would say is a piece of what we do when we wake up. And I think that is different from my experience being in a university. Not that I wasn't paying attention to the trends that were around me, but you're a bit more isolated in the university environment, and you're really focused on your students. You're focused on your university. You might think about it within the context of the larger ecosystem, but ultimately day to day, your work is focused on your institution. And our work has to be focused on thousands of institutions and thousands upon thousands of employers. And that's just a larger scope. It's a broader perspective. So that's one. I think the second is I did not understand sort of how customization can have impact on innovation. So as a university partner back in the day, I remember calling my relationship manager or calling the person that I was working with at Handshake, or quite frankly, at other technology partners that I had, thinking, well, I just have this one simple request. I just have this one thing. If you could just change this one thing in the system, that would make my life so much easier. And not recognizing that for some systems, if you keep making all these tiny little customized tweaks, the database, the code base, the maintenance on that as a company is actually extensive, because then you're actually maintaining hundreds or thousands of individual customized sort of databases. And when you try to innovate, when you try to change something, you have so many edge cases that it becomes extremely difficult. And that is actually what happened with some of our previous technology that I had used before at some of my different universities. Some of those companies were not innovating, quite frankly, very quickly. Maybe they would roll out 1 or 2 new things a year because they had so much customization that it didn't actually allow them to stay abreast of what was happening in the ecosystem, what was happening in our landscape, and how we needed to adapt for all of our varying constituents, our students being the ones that actually adapt the fastest and have the highest expectations of what it is we are doing. Which leads me to the third point, which is the product process. I didn't understand the product process. I had never worked in a company or in an organization that had products. And so I thought it was as simple as just saying, well, I want this new button, or I want this new dropdown, or I want this new thing on this page. And you just did it. And it was really simple. And I didn't understand why it took time. And I think what I discovered about the proper product process is that it's actually not about just hearing feedback and saying, oh, this is what you want. Okay, I'll do this. Because if you did that, you actually would end up with kind of almost a Frankenstein product. Instead, a proper product process is about asking the right questions. And the right questions are often about, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is the outcome of what it is you are looking for? Because if I understand that, these really smart, wonderful people who are actually trained in product can actually help us design a way to get there that might look really different from how we would have imagined it, right? And it kind of goes back to that old Henry Ford quote. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? Nobody would have said I wanted a car. And so I think that's an easy analogy. And I think when I think back to my own experience in higher education, quite frankly, it reminds me of in career services, we are constantly getting feedback from faculty, from administrators, from alumni, from parents who all think they can do our job, who all think that because they have a job, they too can do career services, right? Not recognizing that there's also a skill and there's a profession to what we do. And we also can't take all of their feedback and just implement every single thing that they're saying. We have to have a vision on that, and we have to ask the right questions. So those are the 3 things that I've definitely learned coming to Handshake, and it's been eye-opening. I've loved it.
That's fascinating. I love that perspective. I mean, for one, customization versus configuration, and being able to be as flexible as possible within an infrastructure that can innovate and evolve and move forward without having gone down a myriad of cul-de-sacs. And secondly, I mean, I think possibly we could do more maybe of expressing how we evolve a product and a platform when, as you say, there are so many voices and so many requests. I know from talking to lots of people, they give me some great suggestions, and sometimes it's very hard to say no, or that's not necessarily on the immediate roadmap. How we can actually incorporate feedback and help people see that what their feedback is doing is helping to evolve the product, but you can't do everything all the time. And that's a tremendous challenge, maybe internally in technology providers that isn't necessarily seen externally. A lot of that paddling below the water, maybe. Just following up on that, Christine, just to say, from your perspective, what might be the key features of a career service now in a post-pandemic world? There's been a lot of change very quickly. Are there key things you'd say now in the immediate future, not like 10 years, but in the foreseeable future, next couple of years, you'd say these are key areas, key ingredients of success technology-wise for careers?
Well, I think the first thing is recognizing that technology and technology providers should be partners, should be true partners. And I think that requires a mindset shift. Paul LeBlanc, who is the president of one of the universities in the US, one of the things that he said recently in a talk that I thought was just really on point was that for a long time, higher education has viewed technology as a utility. They have not viewed technology as a partner. And I think that message right there is probably at the very core of all of this. The only way for us to be able to reach 100% of our students and not have students that are underrepresented, that perhaps need us the most, fall through the cracks, is to ensure that as people and as a team, we are actively partnering with technology and technology providers, because they will be able to help us do some of the things that we cannot do. And they will also free us up of time so that we can do the things that technology cannot do. And so if we actually view ourselves as sort of one team, I think it will change our mindset in expanding sort of what our skill set is as an overall team and what it is we can do. So I think that mindset shift is really key. I think the second piece to it is be willing to change. So there are some processes and workflows that certainly I know within the States we have had for longer than I have been alive. And I would guess that in the UK, there are probably some similar workflows that you all are very familiar with as well. But I think the reality is it's time for us to continue thinking through, does that workflow actually still make sense? Is that the best use of either our time? Is it giving us the best outcome that we want for students? Is it what students would even expect at this particular point in time? And how do we need to think through all of those pieces? Technology nowadays is not just transactional. It's not just taking what was once done in paper format and doing it online. Technology and platforms like Handshake now can actually help deliver connections, can help deliver relationships, like Valerie was talking about, for our students who didn't have those things. And so I think recognizing the strength of what technology can do will help to supplement the skills that we already have in the career space. Now, what I would say very tactically is I am seeing more and more career centers in the US, and I would venture perhaps in the UK, it's starting as well, create more positions for technologists, for people who are really looking at the technology strategy of your career center, right? So let's just say 20 years ago, there used to be career librarians that existed on people's staff. And as things have moved online and people have sort of closed down their career libraries to make space for other things, they've gotten rid of that position. And over time, we've seen positions pop up with people who are directors of data and insight or operations to help manage our reporting. Well, I think the time has come for us to really have dedicated positions for people who understand technology, understand the integration of technology, and not just of something like Handshake, but Handshake plus all the other technology that you're also employing. And how do you think about how they work together? How do you think about that in your strategy? So for me, I think those are a few of the things that would be most key to a current career center and how they might think about partnering with technology.
Oh, I totally agree, and we are seeing that those kind of roles are becoming more prevalent over here in the UK. I think I saw a job ad for one just this morning, and I'd advocate that any team needs to be thinking about some way of developing the skills and bringing people in, and I think possibly looking externally as well at some of that. And I'd also venture, tapping into student expertise and really bringing students into this inner circle, feedback, or even, we see many universities now leveraging their own students as part of the team or part of the engagement or peer-to-peer engagement. Lots going on. Valerie, it's time for the $6 million question. I'm throwing it over to you here. What do employers really want? I hear a lot around transferable skills, professional skills. Students need to demonstrate resilience and grit and creativity. From an employer perspective, is that what you want? And how can we help students be successful? How can we help them really match up to that?
So this is my favorite question. And as long as I've been hiring people, whether for my own team or for organizations, it astonishes me how the answer is so simple, and yet it just defies execution. So I'm going to tell everyone what it takes to be highly employable. Okay, ready? Here we go. Number one, know the mission of the company. Really know it. When you are talking to a prospective employer, know what they care about, know what matters to them. It is amazing how many interviewees do not know what is the mission of the company that they are applying to. Know the mission, okay? Number two, show that you understand the business. Now notice those two things I've said so far have nothing to do with the skill set of the interviewee, right? Neither one. Understand the business. What do they do? What is their purpose? And how do they get it done? Just demonstrating those first two things, you are already on your way to having a killer interview. All right, so there's the two things. And I wrote these down because I wanted to make sure that I did not forget. Number three, know the job description thoroughly. Like the role you are going, it is amazing how many people read the title, they read the first couple of lines and don't read the entire job description. If you know the role and can speak to what the hiring manager is looking for, now you are totally crushing the interview. Still, haven't really talked about what you're bringing to the table, right? Not yet. So you do those three things. Then number four, you talk about what you have in your core competencies that matches all those things I just talked about. It does not have to be directly relatable to the actual job. It can be something you've done at a nonprofit, at a volunteer basis, on a campus organization. It did not have to be paid. You just have to demonstrate that you have all those understandings and what you know how to do and have done matches that. That is how you crush an interview. And it is astonishing how many people do not do that. And I will also say that don't feel that having 1 or 2 years and a succession of doing 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter anymore. There's no such thing as you have to be there 5 years, have to be somewhere 4 years. You can be early talent. You can have 3 different jobs in 3 years. As long as you can tell me how those 3 roles match what I need you to do now, I could care less you've had 3 jobs in 3 years. So for those career hoppers who are trying to figure out what they want to do, go for it. We don't have enough psychologists because parents told their kids not to study psychology, and now we have a mental health crisis. We don't have enough psychologists. Not enough people in manufacturing because parents told their kids you can't have a manufacturing job and you're not going to be able to get hired. Don't have enough people in manufacturing right now. So do what compels you and what you're interested in. The roles will find you. Just know how it all connects to the person you're talking to about the role you're going for. That's how you crush an interview.
That's brilliant, Valerie. Thank you. As a parent myself, I know that parents are the biggest enemy in the whole of this, in terms of their preconceptions of what their children should do. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. I'm already relaying that back to my own daughter in terms of her career. I'm conscious we've burnt through the time. I'm going to have to skip a question, but to wrap up now, and thank you both, I just want to say, looking ahead now, what do you find most exciting about the future in this environment we're in for career services, for employers recruiting, for students, for Handshake? What is it that gives you a twinkle in your eye or a spring in your step? Christine, what is it that's making you smile?
What really excites me is our desire and mission to continue helping everyone start, restart, or jumpstart their career. We want to grow with our students, and we want to continue being a really relevant platform, even for young alumni, for people who are looking to pivot and change careers. And I think our plans to continue building skills and helping folks to pivot is really, really exciting. I believe we have a space in this ecosystem to help folks that don't already have those connections, and we can help anybody at any stage of their career. And so I'm excited about all the potential that we have as we continue to grow, we continue to expand.
Valerie, from your perspective, here you are, your honeymoon period at Handshake. What is it that is giving you a spring in your step?
The same thing when I was, talking to all the execs at Handshake and trying to decide if this was the right next move for me. It's the people at Handshake. The knowledge, look at Christine. Who wouldn't want to join a company that had Christine leading your education? It is the understanding that there is a science to recruiting that needs to be embedded into technology that provides access for students and early talent across the globe in a way that employers need to be able to find them. Handshake has cracked that code, and it is so exciting to work with people who get it, who understand that HR and recruiting are a profession, who talk to professionals, understanding that they have technical skills that need to be respected in order to explain to them why Handshake is so valuable. I'm at the right place at the right time to really have a meaningful impact on the world and on people's ability to support themselves and grow their careers and sustain their families and themselves. Couldn't be a better time or a better place than Handshake.
Thank you. And you touch on something that resonates with me there. We've talked about employers, how they recruit students, but I think also as a student or anyone going into a job, that human connection and actually talking to people, and do you connect with them? Are you on the same wavelength? Do you feel a shared value system with those people who you might then go and work with is so hugely important. For me, some of the stuff that came out of our recent Careers 2032 research was how students a lot of didn't have the confidence, didn't know what they wanted to do. And I think having technology more and more able to help them explore potential avenues, careers and jobs that they might never even have thought of or heard of that are out there, and really widening those horizons. I think the more we can do that for a lot of people who, I remember myself not having a clue what to do, how we can help them make those first steps, those first baby steps is really, really important. Thank you, both of you, really appreciate it. You can go and get yourself a nice big cup of coffee now. And get on with your days. But thank you for contributing today and sharing some of your US experience over here in the UK. And with that, I'm going to